condemned what appeared to be gross violations of human rights. In my conversations with the leaders of the region and the world, and in my public and private statements, I have spoken out bluntly and repeatedly. The violence must stop. Those responsible for so brutally shedding the blood of innocents must be punished. Fundamental human rights must be respected. Distinguished members of the Council, Madam President, my special advisors on the prevention of genocide and the responsibility to protect have reminded the national authorities in Libya, as well as in other countries facing large-scale popular protests, that the heads of state and government at the 2005 World Summit pledged to protect populations by preventing genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity, as well as their incitement. The challenges for us now is how to provide real protection and do all we can to halt the ongoing violence. As you look to your next steps, I urge you to consider a wide range of options for...
UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon there addressing the Security Council in New York on the situation in Libya. He said, let us speak frankly. These accounts, talking about accounts from civilians, human rights groups, raise grave concerns about the nature and scale of the conflict. Before we actually came to Mr. Ban, he said there were reports indicating over 1,000 people have been killed during the protest. That is the information that the United Nations is operating on. On the right-hand side of your screen, thousands of kilometers away, Malta, Valletta, where a US ferry, chartered ferry, has arrived in Malta carrying evacuees from Tripoli. There's another one, another American one at least, due in the next few hours, and then a Chinese one as well, I believe. All evacuating people from Tripoli. We're told upwards of 300 people on board this ferry, which docked in Valletta about half an hour, 40 minutes ago. Injured and sick people being taken off first. Back to New York now, Ban Ki-moon.
Let us be mindful of the urgency of the moment. In these circumstances, the loss of time means more loss of lives. On Monday, I'll travel to Washington to discuss these and other matters with President Obama. Excellencies, allow me to touch on two other developments regarding peace and security on the continent. The first, with respect to the situation in Darfur, the AU-UN Joint Chief Mediator continues to engage the government of Sudan and the two leading rebel factions, the Justice and Equality Movement and the Liberation and Justice Movement in Doha. The parties are currently reviewing a draft agreement. It is essential for the international community to step up its engagement and help the parties reach an inclusive and comprehensive peace. I'm also concerned about continued hostilities between the government and the tactical alliance of rebel groups in northern Darfur, which have reportedly displaced large numbers of civilians. UNAMID is dispatching patrols to verify these reports and has increased its presence to protect civilians in the area, as well as to provide water and food to those who have been displaced. Finally, I have been meeting today with the President of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Mr. Obiang Nguema Mbasogo, and the President of the Gabonese Republic, Mr. Ali Bongo Ondimba. At our invitation, the two leaders have come together at the United Nations in an effort to resolve the long-standing border dispute between the two countries. I am pleased to report that the two leaders have reiterated their commitment to submit the dispute to the International Court of Justice and to make every effort to conclude the mediation as soon as possible. I want to underscore that they will have the full support of the United Nations as they work together to find a solution. This is an important demonstration of statesmanship on both sides. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and distinguished members of the Council for your kind attention. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General for his briefing.
So there you go, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon there on the left-hand side of your screen addressing the Security Council. He gave some pretty interesting numbers, actually. Reports of over 1,000 people killed during the protests, 22,000 refugees heading over to Tunisia, 15,000 to Egypt. He's asking European countries, please keep your borders open. Do not close your doors to people trying to get out of Libya. On this vessel, some people who did get out of Libya. This is a US chartered ferry, the first of two, which is docked in Valletta in Malta. Taken upwards of 300 people across pretty heavy seas, we're told, to Malta. Priority, as our correspondent told us, was to get the sick and injured off first. We've seen some of that medical crews heading on board and taking people off out to medical assistance, the hospital in Malta, ready to receive them. Just shows you that what's going on in Libya is affecting so many different parts of the world. There are so many strands, if you like, to the conflict in Libya. These, some of the pictures from earlier of the sick and injured being taken off that ferry and into medical care in Malta. I'm Kamal Santamaria. Thanks for staying with us here on Al Jazeera.
Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. Later in the programme, a very moving story from Palestine and the extraordinary tale of the hostage who went back to Colombia. But we begin, of course, with the continuing unrest in the Middle East. While there have been plenty of headlines about Colonel Gaddafi this week, protests have continued markedly across the Middle East, and in particular in the tiny Gulf state of Bahrain. A week after 7 people were killed in a security crackdown, demonstrators are once again camping out in the capital's Pearl Square, but after the military had withdrawn at the weekend. The protesters are calling for the government to resign and for more political reform. So, what now? Well, joining me is Bahrain's Foreign Minister, Khalid al-Khalifa. Mr. Foreign Secretary, you said in one of your speeches in the last few days that you are promising a different kind of politics, to come out of the negotiations which have not really started yet. How would you like there to be a different kind of politics there in Bahrain?
Well, as of what happened 10 years ago when His Majesty promised a different kind of politics and initiated a dialogue with people, and that ended up with a national charter that got us through a new era for Bahrain. Now this is again, we are doing it and we are moving forward with the promises and real promises to talk to everybody in Bahrain, talk to the people, answer all the demands and discuss them in a very genuine way, and we're looking forward to do it very soon.
Yes, when do you hope that will take place? Because obviously the negotiations and the discussions about discussions have obviously been going on since last Thursday and so on. When would you hope that you will be able to sit down with the representatives of the protesters and everything? Would you hope that will happen within the next week?
Yes, most of the period since last Thursday was a period of to reach calm and to prepare for this dialogue. And we are there. We are now in a very calm situation in Bahrain. The protesters are protesting, and the work is being done in preparation for the dialogue. So I do, yes, expect it to commence within the next week, but we ask everybody to respond positively to that dialogue because we are genuinely keen, and we believe that this is our way forward for Bahrain.
Well, that's very clear, yes, because obviously the events of, looking back on it, the events, particularly the events of last Thursday and the 7 deaths were obviously a mistake, but in the last few days you would be seem to be regaining some of that lost ground yourselves?
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. What happened last Thursday and Friday were tragic events. And Bahrain is not used to deaths happening in political protests. We are used to protests all the time, and what happened is tragic and it's being investigated. But definitely the situation is going back to almost normal, and people coming back to talk to each other. And that's what naturally makes us in a position to regain our strength and move forward.
And it would seem, Foreign Secretary, from what you've said, that in terms of these negotiations when they're ready to start, that no subject, you've said, and your colleagues have said, no subject is ruled out. Obviously, you can't say in advance exactly what the outcome's going to be, but is that right to say that no subjects of the debate about the position of the royal family and all these issues,
Absolutely
everything can be discussed?
Everything can be discussed. This is a real dialogue. This is a national dialogue where everybody can come to the table, and it won't be helpful to exclude any subject that is being demanded by the people or by one group or another. That won't help the dialogue to succeed. So we are so keen here to have it to be successful, and nothing will be excluded. Everything will be on the table.
So the result of this could be more, for instance, could be more democracy in Bahrain?
There's no doubt about that.
That's very clear. Tell me, what is it that one area that keeps coming up and so on, and Foreign Secretary, is the area of the Shia majority in Bahrain, and the fact that despite that majority, out of 50 government posts, only 4 are held by Shias, and Shias are not allowed to be in the Bahraini Defence Force and so on. Are those issues that, having been discussed, do you think can be constructively resolved in your negotiations?
Of course. Of course, these are issues to be discussed, you know, configuration of government, representation, all issues that can be discussed. Whatever issue that is a concern for any group in our society is there to be discussed and to be addressed properly. And we look forward to hear it from them. And definitely, we've seen these issues before. We made headways in these issues, same issues before, and that doesn't prevent us from moving